Hi, I'm Colby Mazzarella. Welcome to Life Matters, where we interview guests who protect human life from conception to natural death. Our guest today is Tina McCormick, the publisher of the New Boston Post, an online newspaper. Thanks, Tina, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is your new project. What's so new about the New Boston Post?
Well, it's pretty new. We just launched August 3rd. We have built a great team. And we are new because we do present a conservative voice that has not really been heard in the mainstream media. And we want to do it, though, in a new kind of way. So we are very transparent about our conservative values. But the way that we convey them is hopefully appealing in a way that moderates or people who might not necessarily agree with us take an interest. We want to make sure that we maintain a civil tone because we feel that that is often lacking, especially when mainstream media reports on life issues. There's often a very hostile, denigrating, or disrespectful tone, and many of the stories are just not told. So we want to make sure that we do bring people the stories that count, that open people's eyes a little bit to life matters.
So you have stories that are downplayed or not even covered at all in this, right, in the mass media.
Right, exactly. I mean, our case in point were the stories of the videos of Planned Parenthood harvesting fetal tissue and fetal organs, and of course that is something we would be covering right away. We wrote an editorial about that. We wrote a column about that. We covered the protests in front of the Planned Parenthood clinic in Boston. So it's very important to be doing that. But besides that, we also want to tell beautiful and appealing stories about life. So we don't want to come across like we are just, trying to push the one agenda, but we also want to bring people in who really don't want to reflect too deeply about these issues, but who might become interested in just human interest stories, personal stories about people dealing perhaps with hardship, be it a crisis pregnancy or at the end of life, families taking care of elderly or sick loved ones. So there's a lot of beauty in that, and I think that has been underreported, and I hope to be doing that quite a bit.
So part of your civil tone, respectful debate about the issue includes the positive side as well as the negative.
Absolutely, and we hope to be a conversation starter also. And not only for people who would initially disagree, but also for people who are in agreement, who have perhaps not really reflected too much about why they are pro-life or share certain conservative values. I feel that you have quite a bit of that also. And there are many perspectives on the conservative sides that actually strengthen the conservative point of view and the pro-life point of view as well. And we shouldn't ever oversimplify, especially if we want to change culture and get other people interested in these sorts of issues.
So when you say change culture, that's a big project, and you would want to think, first say, how would you like to change our culture? And what would be a good change for us?
Right. I think if we're talking about abortion, a big issue is not only that we're actually killing a human being by having abortions, having an abortion, but it affects the way that motherhood is perceived. It affects the way that the bond between a mother and her child is seen. And that's a big cultural issue. That affects everything. It also affects how we as a culture treat our children. It affects the way that women are perceived. And that's something that cannot be changed overnight. And that cannot be changed through legislation either. This is a longer process to make people aware of all these components of what it means to be pro-life.
So what do you think, for example, how would the way women are seen in our culture change now since abortion's been legal?
Well, I think that motherhood is actually downplayed or denigrated. I want to think that motherhood is something fantastic and wonderful, and every woman who becomes pregnant hopefully can celebrate that fact. In the earliest American feminist movement, one of the issues was not to prevent women from having abortions, but to holding society accountable for having women in situations where they felt forced to have an abortion, and that was seen as the tragedy.
So the early feminists were not pro-abortion. They were saying,
no, on the contrary,
it's preventable.
Susan B. Anthony was very clear that if a woman chose abortion, it was because society had failed her. Mm-hmm. And I think that really is the key issue. Now, many people, and young people, or perhaps even at every age, see abortion really as the easy way out. And it certainly might solve a short-term problem, but in the long term, we also know that it creates a lot of pain, and many women will never heal from that event. And that should really be prevented. And women should know that ahead of time. And that truth is really kept from them. Culturally, they are presented with this easy solution. And often people even quote this in terms of compassion, right? We hear people say, well, it's in the woman's interest, it's her body. And that is supposed to elicit some kind of a compassion, which in many people it actually does, but then there's no deeper reflection about what this really does to the woman.
I've read articles saying on both sides, one side would say if men don't get pregnant and men don't have to have the consequences of their sexual choices, women are the ones who have to get pregnant. But then on the other side, we all know that there's men and women have different viewpoints and different nurturing focuses on nurturing. And like if abortion makes a woman have no consequences like a man, then it seems that could change the way a culture looks at women.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Well, I think what you're just bringing up, that for men there is no consequence really. This has helped also men to be irresponsible, of course, right? Because there are many men who would just propose that as the solution and the easy way out, and they don't want to take responsibility.
Yeah, and I think I should put quotation marks around no consequences. That's what people say, that there are no consequences for men or for women.
Well, the thing is, men can now get away from not accepting consequences that they should.
And what do you think the consequences are still there for a man with who has paid for his wife or girlfriend's abortion? What kind of consequences, you're talking about changing a culture. How does this all fit together?
Well, culturally, men should also recognize their responsibilities, and that needs to change because more and more young men don't feel responsible at all.
I've heard of post-abortion syndrome for men and for women, and I guess it could turn out in different ways for different.
Yes, it's very sad, of course, because then you have the flip side where some women perhaps see this really as the easy way out, and they don't want to commit to the father of the child, and the father is in pain and hurt. So that, of course, it's very sad. But I think culturally, the bigger consequence is that many men feel simply not responsible.
So changing cultures back or forward in a different direction. I mean, I guess media is a big part of that.
Yes.
Our mass media has its, you can read about surveys of the beliefs of executives and anchormen and reporters, anchorwomen, and all the different people in the media. They have their own agenda for changing the culture.
Yes.
Now here are you, a New Boston Post, with a conservative view of what would be a good improvement in culture. So how do you think what's the role of media in changing culture?
It's huge. I mean, that's what people go to for information and to shape their lives, I suppose. And in Boston, media is pretty one-sided, I would say, so far. And I think it's important to have a counterpoint. And in a way, though, also to rise above the noise, which is not just local, but it's national, the noise of people fighting it out and trying to score political points. This goes way beyond scoring political points. These are really important issues. And so I hope that with the way that we present news and comment on news, that we can rise above that and make people reflect a little more deeply about beliefs and life and other issues.
Well, speaking of national media and local media, how much is New Boston Post a Massachusetts conservative? That's like dry water. And how much is it a national?
Well, we do cover national news, just in a more limited way, because our team is still quite small, so we aggregate quite a bit national news. But what we do is we tend to focus on local stories that can be tied to a national context. And of course, anything that has to do with life, abortion or assisted suicide is a national topic.
So we talked about the beginning of life quite a bit. Now, what about the end of life? For example, you mentioned assisted suicide.
Well, that's coming up, isn't it? Again, in the fall, there will, I think, be a hearing on October 27 in the State House.
For whether Massachusetts would have assisted suicide, doctor-assisted suicide.
Doctor-assisted suicide, exactly. And it's a horrific idea, really. But again, what we are dealing with is people who are thinking what they believe is compassion, because they feel nobody should suffer, so everybody should have the choice just to end their life. But of course, then the bigger consequence of that is that many people might just choose to die, but to not burden the family, or because they simply feel lonely or depressed. And there is so much palliative care available for any kind of painful situation.
Many new pain medications and techniques.
At the end of life. And personally, I think that it can be a great gift to the family to be able to be there and be with that loved one who's dying. In fact, I had that experience with my own mother, who died of terminal cancer a few years ago. And there was tremendous dignity even though she was enduring terrible pain. But we were all around her as her family, and it was a gift to us that we could take care of her.
I read an article about a man who was estranged from his family, applied for assisted suicide in Oregon, but found more support. And in those last weeks where he would have been dead, he reconciled with his daughter, and they had a lot of peace from there.
That's wonderful.
So it can make a huge change in a family. Well, talking about cultural change, how about the perception of doctors changing if we had assisted suicide? I mean, the perception of a doctor seems the opposite of giving you a poison pill to end your life.
Yes, exactly. The oath of Hippocrates, right? Absolutely. Now, I found that even that also applies when you're pregnant. In fact, so when I was pregnant for the first time and I started to see my OBGYN, I knew he was an absolute expert in the field. I knew he would be taking very good care of me and my child. But suddenly, I saw him almost like an enemy, because I knew that at any point during my pregnancy, if I had, fallen into the deepest depression, had suddenly been very afraid, whatever, and I would have asked him to perform an abortion, he probably would have done it. So that put it kind of in perspective for me too. So on the one hand, he's supposed to be there, and I'm supposed to trust him with my life and that of my child. But can I really trust him 100% if I go crazy that he's going to protect my child, right? So, and it's the same, of course, at the end with end-of-life questions, right? Do we, who is that? Who is the doctor who's going to take care of us? Can we really make sure that he has our best interest?
Yes, I know in countries such as Holland, the Netherlands, where the assisted suicide is very, very common, that elderly people and sick people feel uncomfortable in a hospital, that they're always being offered the last final pill that will end all their sufferings, and they aren't comfortable.
Yes. No, I can tell you again, from if you don't mind, another personal story.
Definitely.
When my mother it was clear she was going to die. She had terminal cancer. And she was living in Copenhagen, in Denmark, which also is very open to assisted suicide. And she was given such a huge jar of morphine pills to take home with her. Much later, we learned that this actually did not help with the pain she was experiencing from her particular cancer. But again, she was suffering from tremendous pain, And she could have easily taken too many of those morphine pills.
So usually in my experience in the United States, you're given a very small prescription and then you can refill it as needed.
Yes, no, it was a big jar.
It's almost inviting you, here's the jar,
yes,
and
right,
you're suffering.
Right. It's a very sad situation.
Yeah. Well, there are new methods of pain relief, and in not only medicine, but other, other kinds of acupuncture.
Yes. And
other
actually, she did then
alternatives.
finally find a way to alleviate the pain.
So there's not as much problem with pain as there has been in the past.
No.
So she finally did alleviate her pain. Just because it's related, if you don't mind telling me what was successful.
Well, she had pancreatic cancer, and morphine is not effective to deal with pain. So it was just another kind of drug plus radiation that helped her then with the pain.
Yeah, they are really studying and developing a lot. So there's more relief than there used to be when there were restrictions on the doctors that really stopped them from helping a dying person.
Yes.
Now, speaking of Denmark, as you said, I hear your lovely accent. Is that where you're from originally?
Yes, I'm a true immigrant. You know, that's going to be another big topic coming up here in America very soon. I was born here, but grew up in Germany and in Denmark. So my first language is German. Then I went to an English school. So then I came here to attend graduate school.
Quite a combination, and now here you
Long
are.
time ago.
You came here to Harvard, right?
Yes.
And now did you have a journalism background to start a newspaper?
No, I did a PhD in history, and I did the traditional route. I got married, I had 5 children, and then I've started writing. I just started writing columns here and there and did some media work, and then just stumbled into the New Boston Post as co-founder.
Wow. So and now you're the publisher also?
Yes.
So what's your news cycle, your deadlines?
Well, it's a beautiful thing to have an internet newspaper because websites can be refreshed any time of day. So the deadlines aren't quite as rigid. And but then again, if something new breaks, you do have to refresh right away. So it goes both ways, I suppose. But the challenges of print are not there. So we refresh throughout the day.
Yeah, so print, newspapers are shutting down. There's a huge earthquake in the media, the business of media. How does your newspaper fit into all that?
Yes, well, we are a lean business, and we won't ever have print. We will stay online, and we do a lot on social media, which is also a lot of fun. It's another way to interact with an audience, and that's been going quite well. So, like us on Facebook.
Very good. So, is how much? It would seem. I mean, it's Massachusetts news in some ways.
Yes,
national news in some ways,
regional.
but it's going to go all over the country.
Yes, of course, and we do have some articles and columns that are sent around and shared. And we will be covering the elections next year, of course, and the primaries in New Hampshire. So that'll be an exciting time.
Now, getting back to the subject of what the mass media doesn't cover, and you got right onto the Planned Parenthood video story, but it wasn't widely covered in the mainstream media?
Well, eventually it was. Yes, it was. But as you know, and that's why we have Life Matters TV, is that many stories are not covered by the mainstream media because they are uncomfortable. And they might prove a point that's not appealing to the other side. So we will be all out. We will cover whatever we can find that's life-affirming and positive. So not only the negative, but certainly also the positive.
Right. So you have something like
beautiful stories of, of motherhood and children and families and
fatherhood.
And fatherhood, yes.
Yeah. So when you say it's a new kind of coverage, so it's different in the content.
The tone. Well, the content, because we have to prioritize. You know, we are not a huge venture. We have a small team. We have 8 people right now, so we do have to prioritize. And our priorities are according to our values, and we're quite transparent about that. And then we are different because we try to be very consistent in the tone that we assume in covering anything. So we try to never denigrate the other side. When you find that a lot in all mainstream media in the country, really, you also have a terrible polarization in this country, where people even have stopped talking and discussing, and there's a real lack of constructive debate on important issues, and hopefully, you know, we can do something about that.
What do you think about the idea that internet news is sort of an echo chamber where people go to hear what they want to hear and they don't hear the other side?
Well, that happens a lot, right? And then you're just preaching to the choir. But so we do want to affirm conservative values, but we also want to challenge conservatives. So it's not just one happy party, but we want to make sure that everybody knows why they believe what they believe and what they really stand for. In a way, Massachusetts is a very interesting place for conservatives because you are always challenged to justify and defend yourself.
Definitely.
If you go to many other places where most people are conservative, you feel it's more kind of a knee-jerk philosophy that people have not really thought through why they believe in something. So I think it's important sometimes to be challenged sometimes. So I hope that we can do that as well. You know? Make sure people know why they believe in something.
Yes, so challenging your readers to think about why, not just what they believe. Do you make a point of presenting both sides? Do you have, you know, that's the strategy of some media that you have the left and the right here?
Well, we always will present the other point of view. So if we cover a news story, we will always get a quote from the other side. We are very consistent about that. And in a column, you know, it's an opinion piece, but you know, you will not denigrate the other side or show disrespect because that's not constructive. That doesn't help anybody.
It's not the most persuasive thing either.
No, it's not. It puts people off, and then you end up preaching to the choir, and we don't want to do that. We want to offer a fresh perspective. Well, we've had your web address on the screen so that people could visit. NewBostonPost.com. NewBostonPost.com. And a fresh, new, conservative view of the news, Massachusetts and national issues, with a civil tone, a respect for the people on both sides of an issue, so that we can have a healthy cultural development and away from a kind of an attack mode and more to a respectful debate. So thank you very much, Tina, for being on this show. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for listening. Tune in next week to Life Matters, where we interview guests who protect human life from conception to natural death. Thank you.